Let's begin with our lead story this hour, as U.S. President Joe Biden has confirmed the killing of the leader of Al-Qaeda, Ayman al-Zawahiri, in a drone strike in Afghanistan. He was killed in a counter-terrorism operation reportedly carried out by the CIA in the Afghan capital of Kabul on Sunday. It is believed Mr. al-Zawahiri and Osama Bin Laden plotted the 9/11 attacks together, and he was one of America's most wanted terrorists. That's according to Mr. Biden.
U.S. President Mr. Biden said Zawahiri had carved a trail of murder and violence against American citizens. Zawahiri took over Al-Qaeda after the death of Bin Laden in 2011. Officials said Zawahiri was on the balcony of a safe house when the drone fired two missiles at him. Other family members were present, but they were unharmed, and only Zawahiri was killed in the attack, they added. Mr. Biden said he had given the final approval for the precision strike on the 71-year-old Egyptian after months of planning. The U.S. president also added that his killing would bring closure to families of the nearly 3,000 victims of the 2001 attacks.
On Saturday, at my direction, the United States successfully concluded an airstrike in Kabul, Afghanistan that killed the emir of Al-Qaeda, Ayman al-Zawahiri. You know, Zawahiri was Bin Laden's leader. He was with him the whole time. He was his number two man, his deputy at the time the terrorist attack 9/11. He was deeply involved in the planning of 9/11. One of the most responsible for the attacks that murdered 2,977 people on American soil. Now, justice has been delivered, and this terrorist leader is no more.
Mr. Biden said Zawahiri had also masterminded other acts of violence, including the suicide bombing of the USS Cole naval destroyer in Aden in October 2000, which killed 17 U.S. sailors, and the 1998 attacks on the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, in which 223 people died. He insisted that Afghanistan would never again become a safe haven for terrorists. A Taliban spokesman described the U.S. operation as a clear violation of international principles, but did not mention Zawahiri. However, U.S. officials maintained that the operation had a legal basis. The killing of Zawahiri comes nearly a year after U.S. troops completed their withdrawal from Afghanistan on the orders of Mr. Biden, bringing an end to a 20-year military presence there. Under a 2020 peace deal with the U.S., the Taliban agreed not to allow Al-Qaeda or any other extremist group to operate in areas under their control.
And staying with our lead story, after the September 11 attacks, the U.S. State Department had offered a $25 billion reward for information or intelligence leading to Ayman al-Zawahiri's capture. He was put under worldwide sanctions in 1999 by the UN's Al-Qaeda Sanctions Committee as a member of Al-Qaeda. But just what more do we know about the man Ayman al-Zawahiri?
Al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahiri, who has been killed in a U.S. drone strike in Afghanistan, was the group's key ideologue and strategist, masterminding its global network and planning attacks on the United States. The 71-year-old Egyptian eye doctor had central roles in the attacks on the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania in 1998 and the 9/11 attacks on Washington, D.C. and New York, where nearly 3,000 people were killed. He was named as the group's leader 2 months after founder Osama Bin Laden was killed by the U.S. in 2011. While Bin Laden came from a privileged background in a prominent Saudi family, al-Zawahiri had the experience of an underground revolutionary. Bin Laden provided Al-Qaeda with charisma and money, but it was al-Zawahiri who brought tactics and organizational skills. In turning to his rise to prominence, he was born in 1951 to a prominent Cairo family. Al-Zawahiri was a grandson of the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, one of Islam's most important mosques. And for those who studied with al-Zawahiri at Cairo University's Faculty of Medicine in the 1970s, describe him as a lively young man who went to the cinema, listened to music, and joked with friends, but was also active in armed opposition circles. He merged his own cell with others to form the group Islamic Jihad and began trying to infiltrate the military, at one point even storing weapons in his private clinic. Al-Zawahiri first rose to prominence when he stood in a courtroom cage facing charges over the assassination of Egyptian President Anwar Sadat in 1981.
Let's discuss this big story with Christopher Harvin, an international communications strategist and former White House appointee under the George W. Bush administration. He joins me from Washington, D.C. via Zoom. Good to have you join us.
Good day. Thank you for having me today.
I see you smiling there. Good news for the U.S., I guess it is. This has drawn commendation for the Biden administration across the aisle. But how much of a blow is this for Al-Qaeda?
I think this is a tremendous blow to Al-Qaeda. Ayman al-Zawahiri was a bad dude. He was the mastermind of 9/11. He killed thousands of Americans throughout Kenya, Tanzania, the USS Cole, in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and he's also killed thousands of Arabs and Muslims.
He was killed in Kabul, Afghanistan. Are you surprised by the fact that he was living? And we understand that he was living in a residential area, a very populated residential area in Kabul. Does that surprise you?
It does not surprise me at all. If you look at how Bin Laden was killed, he was hiding out in Pakistan and Abbottabad. And there's hundreds of Al-Qaeda fighters in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and other areas that are hiding out and on the run.
And I want to take a comment by Lindsey Graham, who is a Republican. While he was commending the Biden administration, he said that America never forgets. Does this mean that the Biden administration or all the U.S. will continue to go after the leadership of Al-Qaeda? Are they still a high priority target for the U.S.?
The U.S. has made a commitment to fighting terrorism around the world. I don't think there's a corner in the world where a terrorist is safe. And I think that terrorists in Afghanistan, particularly Al-Qaeda, should be concerned that the U.S. will hunt them down. And we do not forget, particularly 9/11.
And let's also talk about the group itself. Taliban has condemned the way and manner in which this was done. They say it is a violation of international principles. We understand, we know that the Taliban and Al-Qaeda are very much close allies. In 2020, I just want to take a comment by former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, where he said that Al-Qaeda is now a shadow of its former self. But now that the Taliban are in power in Afghanistan, do you think that this poses a serious risk or threat for the national security in U.S.?
I think the U.S. has to continue to be vigilant in Afghanistan, and we are being vigilant. The attack yesterday and the killing of al-Zawahiri dictates this, that we will be vigilant in Afghanistan, and we will hold the Taliban accountable for their actions and for their inactions against terrorists. And I do think that Al-Qaeda is significantly weaker than it was 20 years ago. It's obvious of that. It's significantly weaker 11 years after we've killed Bin Laden. And I think that Al-Qaeda will have some challenges with al-Zawahiri. He was their top man. He does have access to resources and plotting terror against Americans. And this is a significant blow. It's yet to be seen who takes the helm of Al-Qaeda now and what happens to them. But significantly, they are still a threat to the Western world.
I was just going to ask you about that. How quick you expect the group to regroup in terms of its operational rhythm and then its succession plan?
I think the group will go through some challenges. Al-Zawahiri was very well connected in the finance world. He was smart in how he masterminded his terror, and he had a lot of respect. And I think that it will fracture the organization more, but we have to be vigilant. This is an organization that's going away. The recruitment, the ideology, the psychological operations, the recruitment online, this organization still is a threat and can still not just only kill Americans, but kill others in Europe and kill anyone else in the world.
And does this have, just in general, does this have any impact on terrorism, global terrorism just around the world? We know that Al-Qaeda also has splinter groups around the world. Do you think that this will also take a toll on some of those splinter groups?
No doubt. I think that there's an awareness that the U.S. is coming and its allies are coming for these terrorists. They're not safe anywhere in the world. And I think they have to be a little uneasy these days, particularly as al-Zawahiri was killed in a residential neighborhood. It was a very clean strike where the U.S. took accountability for civilian casualties and tried to minimize any, and like there were none. And I do think that this sends a message to them that they should not be complacent, and the U.S. will not be complacent on their actions.
For talking to us, Christopher Harvin, International Communication Strategist and former White House appointee under the George W. Bush administration.